So welcome to the workshop. In this workshop, we're going to focus on our newest feature, which is Gumloop custom nodes. I think this is one of the most powerful features we've released, so I thought I'd do kind of a live walkthrough of a couple of use cases just to show you how to best use the feature and what it's actually supposed to be used for. So at a high level, I mean, Gumloop already has all of these integrations. Like you can use all these AI nodes, scrape the web, use integrations with all these different third parties and authenticate with the services. But sometimes, especially for larger companies, they have a lot of internal data that they want to interface with or more niche APIs that they want to use. So previously on Gumloop, you would have had to, let's say I want to call my internal API. I would have to use our API node. I would drag that onto the canvas. I'd have to kind of annoyingly specify the endpoint, the headers, the body, do all of this really technical work in this node, which isn't the best experience. What you can do now, well, just to also add on to how frustrating that experience is, when you call this API, you would then need to parse the response with a JSON node, probably have several JSON nodes where you parse all the different keys, and all of this is quite cumbersome. Ideally, you can just have an integration that integrates seamlessly with your own internal data, your database, or some niche API that you want to call. Another point of friction is sometimes you want to do these more nuanced data manipulation tasks, like you want to format text in a certain way or deduplicate lists, or really do any sort of really niche work with your data, but the nodes on Gumloop might not suffice. So now you can build a custom node, is what our new feature does. You have this new section called custom nodes. I have 36 pre-built, which we're not going to look at right now. We're going to build nodes completely from scratch. But to walk through what the feature does, if you press on create a custom node, you can name your node. So I'll call this my node. You can specify a description. This node is totally custom. And you kind of build your node piece by piece and then ask AI to generate the actual logic in the backend without needing to have to code yourself if you don't want to. So when I'm adding inputs, let's say this node is supposed to take in a name, and then it's supposed to output student ID, for example. I'll say this is type text. I want an input of name and student ID. You can also specify parameters, which are fields on the node itself. So if I want a text field called like school, if I wanted to specify the school on the node, or if I wanted a drop down, I can add that and specify options like grade 10, grade 11, grade 12. And now you have this drop down that you can access on the node. And on the back end, the actual logic that's being run in the node is totally written by AI. So if I wanted to say call a fake endpoint that takes a student name and outputs what did I say? A student ID. Obviously, this is a terrible prompt and not going to be generating useful code, but the AI understands the context of what it's doing, what a Gumloop node is, that it expects inputs and outputs, and then it will write the code for you. And then it also has the context, like you can kind of iterate on your code with AI. So I could say, add comments throughout the code, explaining each line. And then it will write the same code, but comment it a bit more thoroughly for each section. So ideally, you can have this whole experience of kind of talking with AI and building your custom node, but on Gumloop, not even having to go to Claude or ChatGPT to write the code for you. Okay, so that's a really brief overview of how these nodes work. Once you're done the node, you press save and it deploys to your whole team, and you will see it in this custom node menu. But for this workshop, I thought I would actually take two live use cases and walk through how we go about building them. So the first one is let me just find it. Okay, the first one is a endpoint that we've spun up that's all fake data, but it is a raw data dump of Gumloop daily usage. So if I go to state gumloop.com/, daily usage. This is all fake data, so don't be concerned. Totally fake. Like these are all at tempmail.com and made up numbers. But you can see like this is just completely raw, hard to parse information from our server about what sort of users have been active on the platform today. And the use case here will be, what if I wanted a daily report sent to our entire team that talks about which users are notable, like which ones faced the most errors, which ones faced had the most node runs, or maybe hit their tier limits. I want a report sent to our team about that so that we're aware of what's happening on the platform that day. And then I also want AI to figure out for each of those people what email we should send them and draft it directly in my inbox. So we can go and build this entire flow together here during this workshop. So step one will be, let's make a new flow on Gumloop. We can call this, well, I will start by making the custom node and then add that to this canvas. So in the custom nodes, I'll go create a new custom node. We'll call this Gumloop daily data dump. I'll say this node gets our daily usage metrics. There's going to be no input because I just want to run it and get today's data. The output is going to be raw data. And it's just going to be like a large dump of basically this information here. I can add a logo. I'll add the Gumloop logo as an icon. And then here's where I'll actually prompt the AI in a useful way. So I'll take the endpoint and I'll say, call this endpoint and return the data, the raw data. So it's a pretty simple use case. I could be doing all of the JSON parsing within this node, but I don't even need to. I think it's fine just to get the raw data and pass that to the next step in the flow. So I can, now that the code is written, I can test it, make sure it's working properly. Yeah, we got all the raw data here. And now it's ready to go. I can save. It's called Gumloop daily data dump. And then I can just refresh this page in order to get my new custom nodes. And then it should be right here at the bottom. So Gumloop daily data dump. Now, if I run this flow, I have access to all of our daily data. I'll call this daily activity reporting. And I'll hit save. And then if we just run this flow, we'll see that the output of this node is our raw data. We don't have any ugly call API nodes. Also, if we had like authentication keys or any secrets, we wouldn't want to ever save those in our flow. It's nice to save them in the custom node itself, which is more secure and kind of locked away. Only the person who created that node will have edit access. So it helps a lot with secret management like that. Okay, so the next step will be, I want to analyze this data and figure out who the most active users are. The best way to do that is just to take the raw data and pass it into an AI step. So I'll drag in an Ask AI node, pass the raw data, and in the most basic way, I'll say, this is my raw data for platform usage. Tell me what you see. This is a terrible prompt. I'll paste in a good prompt in a second. But just to illustrate that you can take this raw data, pass it into a smart model like GPT-4o, and even without much information at all, it will produce some analysis. It'll need a lot more direction to actually understand what it's looking at, but I'll just paste that prompt in a second. I have it pre-built because we actually run this internally for ourselves. The more information you input to an AI node and the more writing that it will, or more content it generates, the longer it takes. So it just has like really surface level observations about the data. I didn't actually instruct it about what it should care about. So I'm going to do that now. I have this prompt pre-written. I want this to be done. So I'm saying, these are my metrics for the day. I want you to figure out who I should be reaching out to and why. Kind of like look at this raw data and follow these pieces of information to figure out who is notable. I say I want free users who experience a high number of errors, because if it's your first time on Gumloop, you're probably on the free plan. And if you experience a high number of errors, I want to know what's going wrong so I can make the experience better for users. For users who hit their credit limit, I want to reach out to them and see if I can give them free credits just to tell me what they want to use Gumloop for. For us, since we're a horizontal platform, it's really good to know what people are trying to use the platform for. So I like to reach out. I wanted to also kind of zone in and narrow in on users who had a lot of support requests with our chatbot. So we have this chatbot down here called Gummy. But if you're having like a 60 message conversation with this chatbot, odds are you're having a bad time. So I want to reach out to them. And then I just want to see who our most active users are that day. This is a pretty big data analysis task. So I can go ahead and upgrade the model to O1, which is kind of what it's made for, to be thoughtful, a bit slower, but more thoughtful in its approach to like large pieces of data analysis. I'm going to run this and we'll see what it returns. One thing I specified at the bottom is I only want to mention what criteria they qualify for, not why reaching out would be good, because I noticed the first time I did this, it was like, you should probably reach out to this person to see what kind of errors they're having. Obviously, I already know that because that's why I specified these points. So I don't really care about that. You can always just kind of add a little directions at the end of your prompt to make sure the AI is doing what you want. It will take definitely longer than other prompts because it's O1 and it's really slow, but the output should be high quality. The next thing I want to do is, okay. I'm unsure why it labeled them as user E, user M, user F. It kind of anonymized the data. So I'll just say, here are the people I follow these rules, mention their emails. Okay, and then if I can just resume this step from here, it'll run again. Assuming that the report it generates in a second will be good, we can go ahead and we're going to take two different paths with this analysis that the AI has created. One will be generating an email report for the team, and the other one will be categorizing all of these outbound messages and actually generating the emails in my inbox so that I can just go ahead and send all these support messages at the end of the day. The first one is the slightly easier route, which is the email report. We'll go ahead and do that right now. What I'll do is I'm simply funneling this report into another AI step where I ask it to format a nice email. I'm going to use GPT-4o for this task. Okay. Yeah. Slightly better. It didn't include the metrics, so I'm going to say mention their emails and their metrics, associated metrics. Okay. And then in this step here, I'm going to have it generate an HTML report. I have a prompt pre-written where I'm just saying, take the content, write an HTML report, color it. I think color is nice in the report so you can see the sections clearly. I'm using GPT-4o for this, and then I'm going to send myself an email notification. So send email notification. I dump this in the body. The recipient will be myself. The subject will be daily usage metrics. And then I'm asking it to generate an HTML email. So I'm going to check off send as HTML. I'm going to save this. And now I'm just going to run it and show you guys what the email is. The reason I broke it up into two AI steps is because the more instruction you give the model per step, the less it's going to listen to your individual instructions. So I wanted to do one where it just handles all the data and creates a nice analysis. And the second one is purely focused on formatting the nice HTML email. I think this is the best way to approach more complex tasks, chaining together prompts to get higher quality. If I were to have just asked O1 to write the HTML, it probably would have had worse analysis or worse HTML. It kind of will cut corners pretty often. So the analysis should be done in a second. I'll probably switch it off of O1 for the sake of this workshop, just because it takes 3 times longer. But should be done in a second. This step will probably take 5 to 10 seconds, and then we'll get the email directly in my inbox, and I'll open it up live to show you what that email looks like. Okay, okay, now we got the actual data. Interesting. It anonymized users again. We'll fix that in a second. Yeah, okay, it replaced their emails with user A, B, and C to respect privacy. That's really nice of the model. A bit annoying for the demo, but we'll fix it. HTML report is being generated, and then should be live in a second. Opening up my inbox. Okay, refreshing. Okay, here is the email. Yeah, I'm just dragging it over here. So it did a couple things that I like, a couple things I don't like, we can tweak. It put it in a table. It put emojis like I asked, which I think is a nice touch. It did include this backtick HTML, which I find really annoying. I can just ask it not to do that. And then it said all these emails are drafted in your inbox, which I asked for, but that's pretty much perfect. The reason that the users are anonymized is because of the previous step, so we'll just fix that. Honestly, I think O1 might be too smart for its own good in this case. So we can just run it on GPT-4o and mention their emails and associated metrics. Okay, and then run it again. I'll go ahead just for the sake of cleanliness. I'll rename this node to be analyze raw data. And then this one's going to be generate HTML email. Just so moving forward, we know exactly what these nodes are built for. And then when I go ahead and collapse them, it's obvious what this flow is actually doing. Okay, this will be the second swing of the email, and then I'll move on to how we go from that analysis to the actual support, like proactive support emails. Okay, here's better. This is better. There's still a bit of room for improvement, but the fake data is presented really nicely. Yeah, I think that's sufficient for this workshop. I would normally go ahead and tweak it a little more to ask it to remove this. But overall, I think that's really good. Now let's start doing the second step, which is extracting. Someone said they came in late. Is the first node a browser or Chrome extension step? How did you get that data into the flow? This is a custom node, which we covered. I'll make another custom node in a second, so you'll get more context about that. But this is essentially calling an internal API in a new custom node. I'll upload this entire workshop to YouTube, so you'll be able to zoom back and see how that happened. Okay, now I want to draft emails. I think this is the legitimately very useful part and the part that we use most often, because it's really nice to have just the emails pre-written from my inbox so I can reach out to customers and address their pain points. So the first thing I want to do is go from this kind of report that was generated with AI, and I want to extract just the email and the reason. So I'm going to use our extract data node. I'm always going to upgrade it for the sake of this because I don't run it 10,000 times a day. I just want to upgrade it to GPT-4o. I want it to extract a list, so I'm going to check that off. And I want to get the email. This is the email of the user we're reaching out to. And I want the reason. Why are we reaching out to them? Just so in the next step, I can generate the right email. And the additional context, I'm just going to give it some information saying, this is the analysis of a product we're using, extract the emails and the reason. Really simple. Okay, now I have a list of emails and a list of reasons. If there's like 20 people, it'll be a list of 20 emails and a list of 20 reasons that are kind of zipped together in the next step. I now want the AI to generate an email. So I want it to consider both what their email is and what their reason is. I'm only passing in the email. I would just use the reason, but I'm passing in the email because sometimes if it's like mark@companyname.com, it's nice for the AI to say, hey, Mark, it's obvious what their name is. That's just how I tend to send emails. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to use a combined text node so we can format this information. Zip here. And then I'm going to say their email is input 1 and their reason for reaching out is input 2. Now we have these little paragraphs that the AI can understand. And in the next step, I want to write the body of the email. So you could just say, write an email, which would be an awful prompt. I'm going to copy paste the prompt I have pre-written in, which has kind of the way I would ask ChatGPT to write an email in this case. I'll say like, this is a Gumloop user, we're reaching out to them. A little bit of nuanced information, like I want to introduce myself as the founder if it's a free user. I want to say I'll offer free credits if they experience a ton of errors or hit their credit limit. You can really change this to be whatever you'd like. But now we have a step to generate the body of the email. And finally, I can use a Gmail node to generate drafts. So I can add the Gmail node, which is auth with my account. The response will go in the body. It's going to be in list mode because it's doing this for many emails. I'm saving it as a draft because I want to, as a human, make sure it's good. The recipient will be the email from over here. So I got to drag that in to the recipient. And another nice touch I want to add is if I were to run this, it will generate emails. I could just have one static subject that's like Max from Gumloop, but that's a bit boring. I want to generate the subject with AI as well. So I'm going to drag in an Ask AI node. I'll just rename this to be write subject. So we know what it's built for. Pick a smart model that listens to my instructions. Close that up. And I want it to use the actual body of the email to write the subject. And the prompt that I'm going to give it is just really basic. Write a super short 3 to 5 word subject of this email. Keep it super brief. I'll even say output nothing else, just so to make sure it doesn't do anything weird. And then this response can go into the subject. So to zoom out of our flow now, I've gone quite a ways without running it. But it should generate all of these emails in my inbox when I press run. So it's going to start once again by analyzing all the raw data. It's going to generate the HTML email, send the notification to me, and then it's going to move on to extracting the email, the reason, generating a different body of the email for each person, generating a subject, and then drafting all of those in my inbox. I can pull up my inbox live to show you it working. Here is my inbox with no drafts. It's processing all of these, drafting them successfully. Okay, it seems to have drafted the emails in my inbox first before sending the report, which is fine. Doesn't matter which one happens first. But all of these are now in my inbox. That one's formatted a little weird. Okay. They don't have good spacing, and we can fix that really easily. Let me show you how we can tweak a flow at the end to avoid burning credits. I think that's one of the nice features of Gumloop as well that not many people know about. I want to discard these drafts. So I think the key problem is right here. Output nothing else. I'm going to say space the emails properly. Add new lines between sections. Just going to make sure. Okay, that's the problem. So GPT-4o would have never done that. It would have never given me just like a non-indented, not formatted email. Claude Haiku would have done that. So my mistake here was not upgrading to a smart model. But we should be good now. And then what I'll do is I'll save this and I can press resume. So it will start the entire flow from here instead of burning all our credits on these previous AI steps. So it will take, yeah, we're already generating the email body. This will save you like 100x the credits you would have spent if you were iterating on the full flow many times. And the drafts should be in my inbox right here when I refresh. This is better. That is a smart AI generated message. Sweet. It works. One improvement I think we can make to this is kind of a crazy flowchart that is a little daunting to look at. What I'm going to do is I'm going to break it up into a subflow, which is also one of the best features on Gumloop in my opinion. I'm going to hold the shift key and highlight these nodes and then press make subflow down here. And what that does is it's going to encapsulate this entire subsection of the flow into its own separate flow. I'll rename the actual subflow generate my emails. And then if I go back to the parent flow, I see I have this subflow called generate my emails. And that all of this logic is kind of hidden here. But one of the reasons subflows are useful is because this is now individually testable. You can run this on its own without needing to worry about generating the email or getting that email notification. And the entire build looks a lot cleaner from the outside because it's broken up into its core components. Also, if you save and refresh, I like the little icons, so you need to refresh to see those. Okay, this needs to be replaced with the subflow. And then now you have generate my emails as the existing subflow. You can see it uses 3 AI steps and a Gmail sender. And then we can always click on view subflow in order to see how it's structured. Okay, that is one walkthrough for this flow that we're actually using internally. Ours is slightly more complex, like the prompts are a little longer in production. We're obviously using real data. The API it's calling is not a fake API. It's like our real API with authentication keys. And also this email notification is being sent out to our whole team. So you'll have like Rahul's email, our entire team's email added as recipients. And it's also scheduled to run every day at a certain time. I believe it's 5 p.m. every day. But basically, this is the crux of how you go about building it. Okay, I have another use case that I think is also quite cool. I've never built it before, so it'll be a bit of an experiment, but this is something I've always wanted to do on the platform. It's another fake endpoint that we have just for testing purposes. Actually, before I get into this, I'll read this question that I see in the chat. Is there a way to manually trigger a step so you can review the previous one to see if it needs to be updated before running the next one? Is there a way? It's like a brain teaser. You cannot trigger an individual step, but I think the resume functionality should let you at least start from there and proceed onwards. But what I would probably do is do that as you build. So before I add the generate HTML email, I made sure to run the analyze raw data several times to make sure it's working. And then I proceed to this one. So you kind of like iteratively get to that. I should have pressed answered live, but you can kind of iteratively get to that like node by node building experience if you do it that way. We should have a run independent node, but similar to the last question, can you add a breakpoint in the flow? Unfortunately, not yet. You can't add a breakpoint. The only thing you can do is break it up into subflows so that you can kind of like individually run this part on its own, separate from the other content. It's kind of a workaround to the breakpoint experience, but we should also add maybe a functionality where you can like highlight nodes and only run these ones or something. That could be useful. Okay. The next use case that I wanted to dive into, like I mentioned, it's completely new to us, but I think it'll be quite interesting. We have this fake endpoint with fake conversations with Gummy. And the idea here is in our backend, we do have the conversations that people have anonymously had with our chatbot. So asking it like, what is list mode? How do I go about building this flow? People sometimes will talk to Gummy for up to like 45 minutes or an hour when they're iterating on their flows because it has access to all of our nodes, understands how to actually approach building, what Gumloop is capable of. But what I wanted to do was analyze these conversations with AI and figure out where Gummy is actually failing to satisfy people's questions and where it might be lying to people, where people are getting frustrated. I could spend all day like reading threads from like anonymized user A talking to Gummy about how they go about building a flow, but that would be a huge waste of time. And it's kind of exactly what AI is built for. So I made a fake endpoint that has a bunch of fake conversations. I used AI to generate most of these. And what I did was I sprinkled in conversations that went poorly here. Conversations where people get visibly frustrated or Gummy says it can't answer their question because it doesn't make sense to them, or people ask like, what have you been talking about? You're lying to me, which is a problem with AI. Let's go ahead and make a new flow in this workbook. I'll call this analyze, I press enter. Analyze Gummy conversations. And since this is an internal endpoint, I also want to use a custom node. So back to this question from Justin before. You said you came in late. How do you get the data into the flow? I'll kind of show you the whole walkthrough right here. I'm going to go to our custom node section. I'm going to create a new custom node, and I'm going to call this Gummy information dump. Gets all the daily conversations from our support chatbot. Obviously, this is a fake endpoint, so it doesn't need credentials, but we will have that. I'll add a Gumloop logo. Don't need any inputs. The output will be conversations, and I want this to actually be a list. So there's going to be many conversations, so I want it to give me a list instead of just one piece of text. That's all I really need. And then here I'll say, I'll copy paste this URL. I might have already done that, but we'll go ahead and do it again. I'll say, call this endpoint, which returns a list of conversations. I want you to give me that list of conversations as output. I could probably give it I'll just give it like a little taste of what those conversations look like so it knows what to expect. I think that'll help with the prompts. Here's the beginning of the response for context. Okay, I can just dump a bunch of data into it and press generate code. It will call the endpoint. And I don't even have to read the code. I can just try it. Let's see what it gives me. Okay, it seems good. Nice. Okay, it's working. I'm going to save this, and then we will see Gummy information dump in our flow over here. So I'm going to refresh it. And I go into my custom nodes. I drag in the custom node picker. I have a lot of these Gummy information dump. Okay. We have the Gummy information. If I run this, let me just test that it's working as expected. It's going to give me a list of information. So I'll say conversation, and then I'll just pass in that input just to make sure it's working. And I should see the combined text node execute many times, yeah, with all of the conversations. So one by one, it will give me the conversation. Okay, let me just make sure. All right. Next, I want to do two things with this. I'm kind of just making this up on the spot, but I want to generate a full overview of what people have been asking today and maybe what topics are worth diving deeper into. I'll do that first. So, okay, I want to generate a report, and then I also want to go conversation by conversation and flag them as maybe negative or positive, or like successful conversation or failed conversation. I'll do that first, generating the report. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is I want to have an Ask AI node where I'll say, these are all of our conversations, or our support conversations, all the conversations users have had today with our support bot. Please write an overview report for the founders of the product to let them know what users are most confused about. Oh wait, actually I'll make it point form. Let them This is actually going to be pretty cool because I think we need this. Let them know what users are confused about, what the bot is failing to answer correctly, and what else would we want to know? Maybe what the most common use cases are. Okay. And if I were to pass this list in one by one, we would have a bit of a problem because it would do this analysis for each conversation. But I want to analyze all the conversations kind of at once. So I'm going to join them together using our join list items node. And instead of these being separate items in a list, it's just going to smush them together and I'm going to join them by new lines so the AI can see this total overview. I'll pass in that in as context, and this would be okay, but it's using a dumb model, so let's bump it up to something much smarter. GPT-4o is kind of, maybe I'll use Claude 3.5 Sonnet. I'll rename this just for clarity's sake, generate analysis. And now we should have a really simple two-step, like kind of like getting information, analyzing information workflow, and I'll press run. It's a lot of information, so the model's probably going to take like 30 seconds to get this out, which isn't a huge deal because ideally at the end of when we're actually using this in production, it'll run once a day. But okay, so yeah, node authenticity. So I went into this raw data and I added a bunch of conversations manually that were users saying like, what are you even talking about? Yeah, what are you talking about? Getting visibly frustrated because I wanted to see how the AI would handle that in this demo. Okay, that's pretty solid. We can do the same sort of thing, like generate a nice email report. If we wanted to kind of follow suit with the last use case, I'll say generate a nicely formatted email to the founders with all this analysis. Use HTML only, no backticks because it always does that, and use color when necessary. Use very minimal styling and output nothing else. Okay, and then I'll send myself another email. I could dump this in Notion or something, or add a row to my Google Sheet, or even make a Google Doc. But I think the email is nice. That's just the way I tend to send myself notifications. So send email notification. Once again, passing it in as the body. Subject is gummy analysis. Send as HTML. I'm the recipient. .com. Okay. And then I can go ahead and run this. Now, the next thing I want to do is maybe categorize each of these conversations as positive or negative and dump them all in a Google Sheet so that we have this ongoing daily analysis of how happy our users are with our support bot. Just pull up my email. Yeah, I think this is okay. There's like a ton we can, the prompt took like 10 seconds to write. There's a ton we can do to make it better, add more thorough analysis. Also, one thing that I like in these sorts of emails is to have another AI step generate like actionable insights, the things that it thinks you should improve from all of the analysis. But I think that's sufficient for now. Next thing we want to do is go one by one. So I'll do sheets.new. And I want to make a new Google Sheet with maybe the date, the conversation, success, or the Boolean, whether it's a success or not. We could also add like, I think that's sufficient for now. Gummy trend data. Okay, so I'll make this shareable. You don't need to do this because I'm on, but I just do it. So if I share this flow with someone, they have an actual Google Sheet they can check out. I'll add a Google Sheet node. I think we might be going over the schedule time, but I'm kind of having fun right now. So we'll finish this demo off. And you'll see that the inputs of this Google Sheet Writer will update with the values we can pass in. All of the information in the middle is missing, which we're going to build right now. But let's do the categorization one by one. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is categorize. Pretty much the only thing I need to do. I need to add a categorizer, and I also want the date, so I'll add a date time node. Where's that? Date time here. Okay. This will make this a subflow as well. Make subflow. It might be a little crazy to do this. We'll just do that. Okay. It's flow 4. We'll call it analyze conversation and go to sheet. I saw someone say I have to run to another meeting, but the recording will be on YouTube, so don't worry. All right, so this subflow is gonna be able to process one conversation at a time. I want to write row by row to this Google Sheet, so I'm gonna do add single new row. I'm gonna pass in the date here. I'm gonna pass in the category here. Whether it was a success or not, we'll add the categories in a second. And the input to this flow needs to be defined in an input node, so I'll call the input conversation. I'm going to pass that conversation into the categorizer so we can categorize it. And I'm also going to pass that conversation into the Google Sheet so that we can go look back at it and understand what was a good or bad conversation. I'm going to add a category of success and failure. And then this would be a terrible categorizer if I didn't provide any additional context. So I'll say down here, this is a conversation with our chatbot. It is considered a success. Let me just zoom in so you can see my typing. A success if the user did not get frustrated or angry, and if the bot didn't fail to reply or provide information. I'll just add a bit more context here saying a successful conversation with no frustrations. Conversation ended in frustration or confusion, or yeah, I could keep going. Honestly, I'm kind of being a bit redundant here. Let's go ahead and pick something like a GPT-4o mini. I like to use smaller models for this sort of task because it's really not that hard to categorize conversations and they're much cheaper and faster. And I will run it, and then we can actually test it out right here. I can say, hey bot, how's it going? Bot, what are you talking about? And then I'll say, I'm frustrated. This is like a really contrived conversation, but we can just test it independently and see how it works. And we'll see that it's already writing to the Google Sheet. That is already added here. It was a failure, clearly. We have the date timestamp. Nice. So the subflow is working. That's kind of the beauty of subflows. You can test them one at a time. Someone said adding nodes manually is rather tedious. Should generate a flow with AI the same way custom nodes are generated. Yes, we're working on that. It's coming out pretty soon. The only problem is, I think if we release this feature, let me just answer live so people can see. If we release this feature, no one will ever see the full power of Gumloop, like you can kind of see when you build it manually. So we need this feature to be really good before we publish it. Okay, now we have the analyze conversations subnode or subflow here, and I can pass in the conversations list, and it should work. So it's analyzing the conversations to the sheet. It's running 15 of these at the same time. And they should be populating in the sheet right here. So the first message is always from Gummy saying like, hey, tell me how to build nodes, but the actual conversation is all there. And we have it classified as success or failure. And I'm also getting that email. So what does a failure look like right here? Let's open it up. Yeah, it's Gummy saying, I understand your frustration, but we're focused on data processing because apparently we can't generate video. Yeah, that's a that is a frustration. I could add another column here that says like reason for frustration and categorize it into like 10 buckets, and then put them all in their own sheet depending on what people are frustrated about. You can really get fancy with what we're doing here. We could also, like, if we had the person's email, we could reach out to them proactively like we did in the other flow. But I think that's sufficient for the case of this, for the sake of the workshop. It ran through all 30 conversations seamlessly, saved. I can schedule this to run at 9 a.m. every morning to analyze the previous day of conversations, but hopefully that was a good overview of how to use custom nodes, how you can leverage internal data, run it through AI and generate insights or reports. This is kind of only scratching the surface of what you can do with Gumloop, but yeah, hopefully that was helpful. If you have any questions, join our Discord server. You can access that in our resources here. There's a Discord link, or you can join down here. We also have, you can email us if you have questions, or send us a message on Twitter or LinkedIn. We should be able to answer there as well. Thanks for attending. Yeah. Bye, everyone.